terrorists. They kill their own people. Just today, the IDF released footage of tunnels full of food of Hamas terrorists living it up, stuffing their faces with their portly frames while their own people suffer. It's time for you to get away. Why do you keep saying answer this like in a childish way? Are you a journalist or are you a fantasist?
Well, I'll tell you how it works.
Let's get real here for a second.
Let me tell you how it works.
What's going on, my beautiful intellects? This is David Mencer, a former spokesman of the Israeli government, doing an interview with Sky News back in July of 2025. The interview was to challenge the Israeli government's policy of imposing a total blockade into Gaza, which cut off all goods and foods for nearly 5 months. Now, you might be wondering why I'm making this interview more than halfway through 2026, and the reason is simple. We've learned a lot more about what's been happening in Gaza since then. So now I want to go back and rewatch these debates and interviews that were done to justify and defend the Israeli government's actions, and I want to hold them up against with what we actually know now from the ground. As always, we are here to debunk Zionist propaganda. Let's begin.
Let's speak now to the Israeli government spokesman, David Mencer. Good evening. And when your allies say the suffering of civilians in Gaza has reached horrific new depths, and when aid agencies say mass starvation is spreading across Gaza, do you find it difficult to come on here to defend that?
Mark, let's start with the facts, not the fiction. In Gaza today, there's no famine caused by Israel. There is a man-made shortage, but it's been engineered by Hamas. That's the point. That's the end of the sentence, which you don't include. This suffering exists because Hamas made it so. Here are the facts. Here are the facts. Aid is flowing. Through the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, millions of meals are being delivered directly to civilians, and also coordinated shipments, food, medicine, raw materials, flour for bakeries and kitchens. Since May, over 4,400 aid trucks have entered Gaza, carrying flour and baby food, 2,500 tons of baby food, high-calorie nutrition for children, and vital medical supplies. Just yesterday alone, Mark, 2 million meals were handed out. In just weeks, that's 1.4 million packages.
So why then are more than 100 aid agencies?
Israel is facilitating this aid every single day. The problem is not Israel. The problem is Hamas. Hamas loots the trucks. It blocks its distribution. It weaponizes hunger and deliberately endangers its own people. And right now, there are over 700 aid trucks sitting inside Gaza waiting for the UN to collect them. 700 aid trucks are right now waiting for the incompetent UN to come and collect them.
Now, can I get a question in now?
If you let me answer them,
about
yes, of course.
28...
Man, there's a lot to unpack there. The first thing I want to unpack is some of the tactics that Mencer is using, and you'll see throughout this video. The first one is called gish galloping. Basically, he is talking over the interviewer, not allowing him to speak, and he's firing off a ton of claims rapidly, one by one, making it almost impossible to address them each. The second is, as soon as he's asked a question, he immediately redirects the blame onto Hamas instead of answering the question directly. Now, I want to talk about Mencer's claim of Hamas looting the aid, because that's the entire justification here, and the timing of this interview cannot be any better. This interview was done on July 23rd, 2025, and literally 2 days later, a USAID, United States government organization responsible for administrating foreign aid, released an internal analysis and found no evidence of Hamas engaging in widespread theft of aid. Just a month before this interview, in June of 2025, Netanyahu had publicly admitted that Israel had armed and supported clans in Gaza that opposed Hamas, specifically a group led by Yasser Abu Shabab. I'll tell you why this is important, because reports from the Associated Press, France 24, and even Israeli-owned media all identified that the militia Netanyahu has publicly admitted to funding has a documented history of looting aid trucks, and even before Israel had started even backing them. Think about that for a second. Israel is arming and funding the exact group being accused of looting aid, while blaming Hamas for looting all the aid. I also want to talk about when Mencer calls the United Nations incompetent. I really want that word to sit with you guys for a second, because it's disingenuous and frankly it's disgusting coming from him. That same month, in July of 2025, the United Nations' own humanitarian office reported that 479 aid workers had been killed in Gaza since October 2023, 326 of them being their own United Nations staff. They are not incompetent. They're dead, killed while trying to get food to women, children, and men who have zero control over anything happening around them by the Israeli government. It's like burning a building down and shooting the firefighters running in to pull the people out. And when some of those firefighters die going in the building, David Mencer goes out on TV and calls the firefighters incompetent because they didn't save everybody fast enough.
Your closest allies. We're talking about 100 aid agencies, not one, not two, all saying the same thing. Now, the UN are telling us there is no security for those trucks. Israel is not guaranteeing that desperate Palestinians will not be killed. That is what they are saying. Now, your military is occupying Gaza. It is your obligation to get food and medical supplies to the population. That is your obligation under international law. Otherwise, you are using hunger as a weapon of war.
Yeah, OK, Mark. So the truth matters here. This is where it is. There is no famine in Gaza. There is a famine of the truth. And Israel will not stop telling it. 87 million meals, 1.8 million tons of aid, which we've facilitated, aid getting in. Hamas loots, it starves its own people, and the world looks away. We open new routes to deliver food and medicine. Hamas blocks them and fires from them, and then cries to an all too willing Sky News, all too willing, to the cameras when civilians are hurt.
Right. Why don't you provide security then? Why don't you provide security then for the UN to get those supplies into Gaza? You can't say, here's the point, you can't say on the one hand that the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is now distributing the aid in Gaza, and then when it's a disaster, with up to 1,000 people shot dead, you start blaming the UN.
Mark?
You start blaming the UN for causing hunger. I mean, it's simply nonsense.
Hamas. The media shows pictures of hungry people, but won't say the words that matter. Hamas stole their food. Hamas caused their suffering. Hamas turned charity into a billion-dollar racket. Just like mafia, they steal the aid, they sell it on the black market, and they're hoarding it for their own terrorist fighters, recruiting killers with that money. So when we have disrupted that pipeline of theft, Hamas saw Israel as a threat to their business model, not their people's salvation. So we've attacked the terrorists while Hamas put civilians in harm's way.
Right, but who is being shot dead? Who is being shot dead? Who is being shot dead when people go to get the food?
Points the finger at Israel instead of the killers. Mark, the tragedy in Gaza is Hamas's doing. They're behind these civilian deaths. They weaponize schools, hospitals, and they run a billion-dollar aid racket.
Right. Answer me this. Answer me this. Answer me this.
Bogus Hamas numbers. You show the carnage, but you never say the words that matter. Hamas is responsible.
Right. Answer me this. Answer me this. Who is being shot at the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation delivery system, distribution system? Who is being shot there? Are you saying 1,000 Hamas terrorists have been shot there? Because that's not the evidence we're getting. You say, why can't you help the UN with all the security they need to distribute the aid that is waiting at the border and use crowd control measures which are not shooting people dead? How about that?
My gosh, Mark, aren't you a clever man for coming up with these great aid distribution? Just share with me your qualifications for dealing with Gazans exactly. Was it in the newsroom at Sky News when you repeat Hamas talking points?
It's not a Hamas talking point. It's
let's get real for a second.
It's not a Hamas talking point.
Hamas designed this war. They designed this killing. They wanted their own people to get shot. They fire at us from crowds. They kill their own people. Just today, the IDF released footage of tunnels full of food of Hamas terrorists living it up, stuffing their faces with their portly frames while their own people suffer. It's time for you to get away. Why do you keep saying answer this like in a childish way? Are you a journalist or are you a fantasist?
Well, I'll tell you how it works.
Let's get real here for a second.
This is Hamas which is doing this. I ask a question,
and we will get the food in, but Hamas must stop stealing it.
Okay, before I break Mencer's argument down, I want you guys to imagine a landlord who controls the thermostat to every apartment in the building. And he's the only one that has access to the thermostat and has been the only one for the last 20 years. And he's even gone so far to calculate the exact minimum temperature needed for a person not to freeze to death. Then one day he gets really angry at all the tenants and he shuts off the heat completely. And when the tenants start to get sick or freeze to death, he gets pressed on it. So he goes on TV and is like, hey, this isn't me, it's the tenants' fault. Each one of them has a thermostat in their apartment and all they need to do is just use it. What he conveniently leaves out, though, is that he's rigged every single thermostat to not go over a certain temperature. What he's trying to do is be sneaky and give this illusion that since every tenant has a thermostat in their apartment, they have actual control of the temperature. Israel has controlled what goes in and out of Gaza for over 20 years. And when I say control, I mean they control it, thoroughly control it, down to the last calorie control it. In 2008, documents released by their own defense ministry showing that Israeli officials had calculated the minimum daily caloric intake per person needed to avoid a full-blown human catastrophe. And that number was used to decide how much food goes into Gaza. Then, on March 2nd, 2025, the Israeli Prime Minister's office of Benjamin Netanyahu had announced that all foods, goods, and supplies will be halted from entering Gaza. Full stop, cold turkey. So think about what that means for a second. If Israel had the ability to calculate down to the calorie exactly how much food a population needed to barely survive, then it also had the ability to prevent a shortage. You don't get to spend 2 decades micromanaging the exact caloric intake of 2 million people and then turn around and cry to the media that you had no control over the consequences when you're the one who shut down the flow.
I'll tell you how it works. You're paid to answer the questions. I'm paid to ask them. Let me ask you another one. It's not just killing civilians in food queues, is it? It's not just the malnutrition. There's something else going on, which is the levelling of Gaza, the destruction of much residential property and infrastructure in Gaza. Why are you doing that? Because the mapping analysis shows now 92% of residential homes in Gaza are destroyed. Why is that happening?
This was a war which Hamas designed, Mark. They designed it this way, specifically to cause as much damage to their own people as possible. Now, from Israel's point of view, we regard any harm to civilians as a tragedy. While this terrorist organization of Hamas, it is their strategy. They have designed this war to harm their own people. They systematically violate international law. They endanger innocent people, and they use them as human shields. And they can rely on Sky as night follows day to repeat the rhetoric. Israel, by contrast, makes every effort to prevent and minimize as much as possible harm to civilian population, including evacuating civilians from combat areas. Hamas and other terrorist organizations in Gaza, they actually work to maximize harm to
Here's
civilians,
the point. Here's the point.
People,
all this deflection. Here's the point.
Brutally.
Because this destruction of residential homes, 92% of Gaza, when that is coupled with your defense minister's plan to put 600,000 Palestinians in a camp they cannot leave unless they want to emigrate, it looks to many people, not only outside Israel but also inside, as ethnic cleansing.
Look, we've got very clear objectives in this war. Israel will always act within international humanitarian law. That word is offensive, to be blunt. Israel is trying to defeat the terrorist organization and
what is the plan then? What is the plan for the population of Gaza going forward? What is the plan for the population of Gaza going forward then? If it's not the plan set out by your defence minister and endorsed the other day by your prime minister?
No, there's a number of plans on the table, and none of them have been taken off the table. All options are open to us. The first thing
so that plan is still on the table? That plan is still on the table?
Mark, the first thing is we need to destroy this terrorist organization and get our hostages back. Yes, Mark, you haven't said that word. Our hostages. 20 of them are still alive. If Hamas released our hostages, laid down its arms, this conflict will be over in an instant. That maybe would upset you because that would mean the end of Hamas. But that is the future. That is the future. That is the good future for Gazans.
All right, guys, there's honestly so much more I wish I can get into here. But if I stop to address every claim Mencer has made, this video would be 8 hours long, no joke. Hence why I brought up the gish galloping tactic earlier. But, don't worry. This is what these videos are for, and there will be more of it. Real quick, though. This channel is brand new, so if you enjoyed this video, liking, subscribing, commenting, and sharing genuinely helps more than you think, and it's how this channel will gain traction, and it's how more people will find their way to content like this instead of the billions of dollars worth of propaganda that's out there. Honestly, people are starting to wake up. That's a powerful movement within itself, but it's also just reassuring seeing people who are no longer afraid to stay quiet in the face of injustice. And who are no longer to be afraid to be the first person, sometimes the only person, to speak up. I really do think it matters to go back and pick these interviews apart because just so many of these claims don't hold up once you compare them to what actually happened on the ground. Let me know what you guys thought down in the comments below, and honestly, I'd love to hear who or what you want me to break down next. Thank you guys, and I'll see you in the next one.
That is the good future for Gazans. It is a Gaza free from a terrorist organization. As for the future...
Point. Let me just make a last point. If you are denying all what we say about starvation, what we say about the destruction in Gaza, what we say about the plan that is intended, why don't you let foreign journalists in? Why don't you allow us unfettered, unrestricted access to Gaza, as we get in most other war zones that I have been to, and many of the correspondents here have been to? Why are you not doing that?
I'm just wondering if you ever get tired of this this line of questioning. Firstly, because...
All right, real quick. Well, one last thing. So that's a completely valid question because today is July 16, 2026, and still no foreign journalists are allowed into Gaza, despite there being a ceasefire in October of 2025. So Mencer is trying to gaslight the interviewer into thinking that he's weird for asking that kind of question. But in reality, that's a very valid question. And still, there are no foreign journalists allowed into Gaza as we speak.
Well, firstly, listen to me, Mark. Listen to me. Firstly, because there's no shortage of these images coming out of Gaza. You see them all the time. So what is this nonsense? We are focused on getting our hostages out.
But you just told me it's all propaganda. You just told me it's all propaganda. Literally just told me that.
Hostages out. Why aren't you raising the plight of our hostages during this interview? Why aren't you putting pressure through your broadcasts on Hamas, the terrorist organization? That would bring the end to this war. We're opening routes to deliver more food and medicine. Hamas is blocking them, and they fire from them, and then they cry to the cameras of Sky when civilians are hurt.